My husband installed spy cameras in our home and shared the footage online. I threw him out and never looked back. 3 years later, he's stalking me across the country, pleading for another chance. Even in the first week of dating, I hated every little thing my husband did. He was obnoxious, unkind, and painfully unfunny. One time, he hacked into my email and canceled a job interview for my dream job. And when I called my mom to tell her what happened, she just said, "Okay, did you thank him for what he did?" You see, I come from a family of arranged marriages. Divorce is basically equated to murder. So in their eyes, my husband could do no wrong. And because he knew I was completely alone and forced to be with him no matter what, he took full advantage of me. He refused to ever throw anything into the trash because that was a woman's job. I wasn't allowed to wear clothes or listen to music that he didn't approve of. And for the most part, I was able to tolerate this since it was nothing I didn't expect anyway. But there was one part of his routine that I hated the most. Every weekend, he'd take a flight to Arizona and do snow with his friends. He swore he wasn't addicted. But one day I logged onto my bank account to see that he had completely drained half of my savings account. I wasn't even angry, just extremely upset, because I knew that if I even tried to talk to anyone about this, they would take a side. For years, my life was filled with threatening texts about collecting debt, my husband's constant beachiness from withdrawal, and random spurts of violence. I practically walked around looking like a zombie every day. And it wasn't until 2 years later that something actually changed, because that's when my grandmother came over. We had her necklace stored on her mantelpiece. It was one that my late grandfather gave to her, and it reminded her of him while he was in the Soviet War. Not to mention it was worth thousands. So when we couldn't find it, adrenaline filled my body. That's when my sorry excuse for a husband came home. Honey, have you seen my grandmother's necklace?" I asked with urgency. He plastered a boyish half smile on his face. You could say that. That's when my grandmother ran down the stairs. She wasn't as patient as me. "You idiot. Where did you put my necklace?" His face went red like he had been caught. "I misplaced it." I immediately knew he had sold it for more blow, but I didn't want to worry my grandmother, so I went along with his lie. But before I could say anything, my grandmother slapped him. "My family put you with a beautiful wife house, and this is how you repay us. Get out of my effing face." He sheepishly walked out the door with his shoulders slightly slumped. And even though I felt bad for my grandmother, I couldn't help but smile, because I knew it was finally over. After 10 years, I could finally get my life back. The divorce process was long and hefty. He tried multiple times to win me back with cheap flowers and chocolate, despite me being lactose intolerant. Not to mention his parents and siblings constantly starting arguments with my parents about how this was all my fault for not being a better wife. But this time, for once, everyone was taking my side, and they ignored them. I started wearing skirts that weren't all the way down to my ankles. I wore my hair untied, letting my natural curls flow. I talked to strangers again. I felt like a princess. So I was changing into my silky VS pink pajama set when it happened. In the corner of my eye, inside the digital alarm clock, I saw a little red light. Well, I had just seen a TikTok video about hidden cameras, so my heart dropped. I immediately went over to investigate and smashed the entire thing on the floor. And amidst the debris, there it was, a little camera. My blood went cold. I instinctively threw it out the window before clutching a pillow and crying my eyes out. That sick man had been watching me every single day for the past 6 months. A sickly feeling washed over me, and the memories of our relationship all came crashing down. Every time he jokingly pinched me for talking to a man. Every time he threw out my clothes because they were too revealing. For the first time, I realized I didn't deserve it. Culture or not, I should be loved in a marriage. Adored, appreciated. Anger crept into every inch of my skin. For the first time, I didn't just hate my ex-husband. I wanted him dead. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every shadow in my room looked like him watching me. Every creak in the floorboard sounded like footsteps. I kept thinking about all the nights I'd changed clothes, all the times I'd cried alone in my room, all the private moments that weren't private at all. The violation felt like a physical weight crushing my chest. The next morning, I carefully collected all the broken pieces of the clock and put them in a shoebox. I wasn't sure what to do with them yet, but something told me I should keep the evidence. I shoved the box in the back of my closet under some winter sweaters. I didn't tell anyone what I'd found. Not my parents, not even my grandmother. I wasn't sure who to trust anymore. For the next week, I barely slept. I kept all the lights on in my apartment and checked under the bed every night like a scared kid. I started showering with the bathroom door locked and windows taped over with paper. I went through every single object in my apartment. Lamps, picture frames, outlets, smoke detectors, looking for more hidden cameras. I didn't find any, but that didn't make me feel better. If anything, it made me more paranoid. What if I was missing something? I changed all my passwords, got a new phone number, and started taking out small amounts of cash from different ATMs to stash around my apartment, just in case. I wasn't sure what I was preparing for, but I knew I needed to be ready for something. About a week after finding the camera, I was heading out to grab coffee when I spotted a familiar car parked at the corner of my street. My stomach dropped. It was his car, that stupid black BMW he'd bought instead of paying our electric bill that one winter. I almost turned around and went back inside, but something in me snapped. I was tired of being afraid. I marched right up to his window and knocked. He rolled it down, looking surprised to see me, like he was just in the area by total coincidence. "What are you doing here?" I asked, not bothering to hide the anger in my voice. "I was just driving by," he said with that fake innocent smile I knew so well. "Thought I'd see how you're doing." "I found the camera," I said flatly. His face twitched slightly, but he recovered quickly. "What camera?" "The one in my alarm clock. The one you put there to spy on me." He laughed, but it sounded hollow. "You're being paranoid. Why would I put a camera in your clock? Maybe you put it there yourself to frame me. You've been acting crazy ever since your grandmother turned you against me." Classic gaslighting. I'd seen this movie before. I didn't argue with him, just stared at him for a long moment, then turned and walked away. I heard him call after me, but I didn't look back. I just closed my door and locked it, then checked all the windows to make sure they were secure. A few days later, I was checking my bank account online when I noticed something weird. My mouse cursor moved slightly on its own, like someone else was controlling it. I yanked the power cord out of the wall so fast I nearly broke it. My hands were shaking as I called a friend who works in IT. "Bring it over now," he told me after I explained what happened. "Don't connect to any networks until I check it out." I wrapped my laptop in a towel like it was contaminated and drove straight to his repair shop. He took one look at my face and cleared his schedule. After about an hour of checking, he confirmed my worst fears. "Someone's been accessing your computer remotely," he said, showing me some technical logs I didn't understand. "Multiple times over the past year at least. They installed a RAT, a remote access Trojan. It lets them see everything you do, access your webcam, your files, everything." I felt sick. "Can you tell who did it?" "Not specifically, but it was installed physically, not through a download. Someone had to have physical access to your laptop." I thought about all the times I'd left my laptop at home while my ex was there. All the banking I'd done, all the emails I'd sent, all the private photos I'd looked at. He'd seen it all. I asked my friend to wipe the laptop completely and set it up fresh. I didn't care about losing files. I just wanted the invasion to stop. That night, I got a message request on Instagram from my ex's brother, Russell. We'd never been close. He was just as sexist as my ex, always making comments about a woman's place and stuff like that. But his message seemed friendly enough at first. "Hey, just checking in. Hope you're doing well with everything." I didn't respond right away, but the messages kept coming over the next few days. "The family misses you. You should come by for dinner sometime. My brother's really changed, you know." Then they started getting weird. "You made your bed, now lie in it. You embarrassed the wrong family. Some things can't be undone." I blocked him immediately. That night, someone egged all my windows. I didn't call the police. What? What would I say? That my ex-brother-in-law sent me cryptic messages and I think he might have thrown eggs at my house? I'd sound crazy. Instead, I cleaned it up myself and installed a cheap security camera pointing at my front door. The next morning, I went to get my grandmother's jewelry box where I'd been keeping some of my own pieces. I'd moved it from my ex's house to my new apartment for safekeeping. When I opened it, my heart stopped. It was completely empty. Not stolen, just emptied. All my jewelry was gone, including a pair of earrings my grandmother had given me for my 16th birthday. That's when I remembered my ex still had a spare key from when we first moved in. I'd asked for it back during the divorce and he'd claimed he lost it. I immediately called a locksmith and had all the locks changed that day. That night, I slept with a kitchen knife under my pillow, just in case. The following week, I noticed something even more disturbing. I was at the grocery store picking up some basics when I spotted a man I didn't recognize at the end of the aisle. He was pretending to look at cereal, but I could feel him watching me. When I moved to another aisle, he followed, now suddenly interested in whatever products I was near. I confronted him directly, asking if he needed something. He didn't say a word, just walked away and disappeared into the parking lot. 2 days later, it happened again. Same grocery store, different man, or maybe the same one in different clothes. I couldn't be sure. This time I took a photo of him with my phone before he noticed and hurried away. I showed the picture to my grandmother when she came over that evening. "You need to come stay with me," she said firmly after hearing about everything that had been happening. "This isn't safe anymore." I was reluctant to leave my new place. It felt like letting him win somehow. But after what happened next, I didn't have a choice. I was scrolling through some photography forums looking for tips on my new hobby when I came across a thread that made my blood run cold. There were photos of me inside my old house, changing clothes, sleeping, brushing my teeth. The usernames were obviously fake and the captions were vile, describing me like I was some kind of object. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. When I could breathe again, I tried to report the photos, but the site said they needed legal documentation proving the photos were taken without consent. How was I supposed to prove that? I didn't even have the camera anymore. I'd thrown it out the window in a panic. I packed a bag that night and went to stay with my grandmother. Her house was in a gated community with security guards, and I felt safer there. The next morning, I was going through my purse looking for my lip balm when I noticed a small device sewn into the lining. I carefully cut it open and found a GPS tracker about the size of a quarter. It had a small battery that was making a faint electronic noise when I emptied my purse completely. I might never have found it otherwise. I finally broke down and told my grandmother everything. The camera, the laptop hack, the photos online, the tracker, all of it. She listened quietly, her face getting sterner by the minute. When I finished, she went to her bedroom and came back with a prepaid phone and an envelope full of cash. "You need to go silent for a while," she said. "Use this phone only. Pay for everything in cash. Don't tell anyone where you're staying, not even your parents. I'll handle them." I took her advice and checked into a small motel under a fake name, paying cash for a week up front. I left my regular phone at my grandmother's house and only used the prepaid one to contact her. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night without waking up in a panic. The next morning, I checked my email at the motel's business center and found something that made my heart race. It was a job offer from Horizon Publishing, the dream company I'd applied to years ago before my ex sabotaged the interview. They wanted me to come in for a meeting that afternoon to discuss an editorial assistant position. I was suspicious, but also desperate for good news. I decided to go, but take precautions. I asked my grandmother to drive by the address first to make sure it was legitimate. She called me an hour later. "There's no publishing company at that address," she said. "It's an empty office building under renovation." My stomach dropped. I knew immediately what was happening. He was trying to lure me out. I thanked my grandmother and asked her not to tell anyone about the fake job offer. Then I did something I never thought I'd have the courage to do. I decided to turn the tables. I started setting up decoys. I created fake social media posts with location tags at places I never went. I left my old phone powered on at my grandmother's house so it would ping cell towers there. I used the motel's computer to send emails from a new account mentioning plans and activities I had no intention of doing. It worked. Within days, I started seeing responses. My ex posted photos of himself, coincidentally, at the coffee shop I'd mentioned in a fake post. His brother showed up at the mall where I'd falsely checked in. I even spotted one of their friends lurking outside a movie theater I'd said I was going to. Each confirmation of their stalking made me more determined. I wasn't just going to escape. I was going to fight back. My grandmother called to tell me that my ex's family was having a gathering that weekend. She'd heard about it from a mutual friend and thought it might be an opportunity. I wasn't sure what she meant until she explained her plan. "I'll tell them I need to speak with them about returning some family heirlooms," she said. "While I'm keeping them busy, you can check his old room at his parents' house. If he's keeping evidence anywhere, it would be there." It was risky, but I agreed. My grandmother was incredibly convincing when she wanted to be. She called my ex's mother and spun a story about wanting to make peace and return some family items that had been mixed up during the divorce. His mother, always concerned with appearances, readily agreed. The day of the gathering, I wore a headscarf and glasses as a simple disguise. My grandmother walked in the front door, carrying a box of random household items we'd collected. While everyone was distracted in the living room, I slipped in through the side door she'd left unlocked for me. I knew where his old bedroom was from previous family visits. It looked untouched, like a shrine to his high school days. Trophies, posters, the whole thing. I searched quickly but thoroughly, checking under the mattress, inside books, behind furniture. Nothing. I was about to give up when I noticed something odd about the floor near his closet. One of the floorboards seemed slightly raised compared to the others. I carefully pried it up and found a small hidden compartment. Inside were several flash drives, a notebook, and a stack of photos of me, all labeled and dated. I grabbed everything and stuffed it into my bag. As I was leaving, I heard voices coming toward the hallway. I ducked into the bathroom just as my ex and his cousin walked past, talking about some sports game. I waited until they returned to the living room, then slipped out the side door and texted my grandmother that I was clear. Later that night, we went through everything I'd found. The flash drives contained thousands of photos and videos from the hidden cameras, not just from the alarm clock, but from all over our old house. The notebook was even worse. Detailed logs of my daily activities, who I talked to, what websites I visited, even what I ate. There were scripts written out for conversations, planning exactly what he would say to manipulate me in different situations. But the most shocking discovery came when we found emails between my ex and a woman named Kayla. From the messages, it was clear they were engaged. He had been planning a wedding while still terrorizing me. There were messages where he complained about me to her, painting himself as the victim of a crazy ex-wife who wouldn't leave him alone. I felt sick, but also determined. This woman deserved to know who she was really marrying. I created an anonymous email account and sent her copies of everything. The photos he'd taken without my consent, the stalking logs, the scripts for manipulation. I included a simple message. "This is who you're planning to marry. I'm his ex-wife. This is what he did to me. This is what he'll do to you." I didn't expect to hear anything back, but a week later, I saw on social media that their engagement was off. That same night, my ex showed up at my grandmother's gate, clearly hammered, screaming my name and demanding to be let in. The security guards called the police, but they just gave him a warning and sent him home in a taxi. No arrest, no real consequences. The next week, I received an official-looking letter from a debt collection agency claiming I owed over $30,000 for a loan I never took out. The paperwork had my signature on it, or at least a very good forgery. I immediately realized what had happened. He had opened credit in my name years ago, probably to fund his substance habit. My grandmother didn't hesitate. She hired a lawyer, a tough, no-nonsense woman named Teresa, who specialized in identity theft and domestic abuse cases. We started gathering records, bank statements, credit reports, everything we could find to prove the fraud. That's when Teresa made a breakthrough. She discovered that my grandmother's necklace hadn't been pawned as we thought. It had been sold on an underground marketplace. The listing was linked to an account that matched my ex's email address pattern, and that account was still active, still using the same IP address. With this evidence, we were finally able to file for a restraining order. The judge granted it immediately, ordering my ex to stay at least 500 feet away from me and my grandmother at all times. We also filed a lawsuit for the identity theft, the stolen jewelry, and the emotional distress from the stalking. The day of the court hearing, my ex showed up in a cheap suit that still had the price tag partially visible on the sleeve. He tried to charm the judge with his boyish smile and casual jokes, acting like this was all just a big misunderstanding between exes. Then Teresa presented the evidence. The hidden camera footage, including frames where his reflection was visible as he set it up, the GPS tracker with his fingerprints, the forged loan documents, the online marketplace listing for my grandmother's necklace, traced directly to his IP address. The courtroom went completely silent. His mother started crying quietly in the back row. Kayla, his ex-fiancée, was there too. She'd come to support me after we'd connected. She just stared at him with pure disgust. The judge didn't hold back. She granted everything we asked for: a permanent restraining order, full financial damages, and an order for him to return all stolen money and property. She also referred the case to the district attorney for potential criminal charges related to the identity theft and invasion of privacy. As we left the courthouse, I felt lighter than I had in years. My ex tried to approach me in the parking lot, but a court officer stepped between us, reminding him of the restraining order. He looked pathetic, standing there with his shoulders slumped, watching as I walked away. A few days later, my phone rang from an unknown number. I didn't answer it, but the caller left a voicemail. It was my ex, using a burner phone, begging me to drop the charges, saying he'd changed, that he loved me, that he'd do anything to make it right. I didn't call back. Instead, I wrote him a letter. Just one sentence. You could have had peace. Instead, you chose war and lost. I mailed it to his parents' house where he was staying, then deleted all the tracking decoys I'd set up, closed my fake social media accounts, and started the process of legally reclaiming my name. My first therapy session was the following week. I sat in the waiting room, nervously flipping through a magazine, wondering if I was ready to talk about everything that had happened. The therapist, a kind-faced woman named Dr. Patel, welcomed me into her office and asked why I was there. I'm reclaiming my life, I told her, and I need help processing what happened so I can move forward. For the next hour, I shared pieces of my story. Not all of it. That would take many sessions, but enough that she understood the scope of what I'd been through. She didn't judge or minimize my experiences. She just listened and validated that what had happened to me was not normal, not okay, and definitely not my fault. Recovery isn't linear, she told me at the end of our session. There will be good days and bad days, but you've already shown incredible strength by getting this far. As I walked out of her office, the sun hit my face, warming my skin. I felt my natural curls bounce freely around my shoulders as I walked to my car. For the first time in years, I smiled, not because life was perfect, but because it was mine again, completely, unquestionably mine. But my journey wasn't over yet. I still had to face the aftermath of everything that had happened, and I knew my ex wouldn't give up easily. The war might have been won, but there were still battles ahead. And this time, I was ready for them. I was right about the battles ahead. About a week after my first therapy session, I found a letter in my mailbox with no return address. Inside was a photo of me entering Dr. Patel's office, taken from across the street. Nothing else, just the photo. My hands started shaking immediately. The message was clear: I'm still watching you. I called Teresa right away and sent her a photo of the letter and envelope. She told me to document everything and bring it to our next meeting. I also called my grandmother, who insisted I stay with her again. I didn't argue this time. That night at my grandmother's house, I couldn't sleep. Every noise made me jump. Around 3 a.m., I heard a notification on my new phone. It was an email from an address I didn't recognize. You think you've won? This is just beginning. I took screenshots and forwarded everything to Teresa. The next morning, my grandmother found me passed out at the kitchen table, surrounded by coffee cups. I'd been too afraid to sleep. She took one look at me and made a decision. We're installing a security system, she announced. The best one we can get. 2 days later, her house was fitted with cameras, motion sensors, and an alarm system that connected directly to the local police. It cost a fortune, but my grandmother didn't even blink at the price. Your safety is worth every penny, she said. I started noticing a black sedan parked across from my grandmother's community gate. Same car, different spots, always just far enough away to be legal. I took photos every time I saw it and sent them to Teresa. She added them to our growing file of evidence. Then things escalated. My parents called in a panic one evening. Someone had broken into their house while they were out shopping. Nothing was stolen, but all the family photos that included me had been taken out of their frames and arranged on their bed. The police came, took statements, but basically shrugged it off as a weird but not technically threatening incident. I felt sick. He was sending a message. He could get to me through my family. Teresa filed for an extension of the restraining order to include my parents and grandmother. The judge granted it immediately. About a week later, I was helping my grandmother with groceries when I noticed a small package on her doorstep. No shipping label, just a plain brown box. My stomach dropped. I told my grandmother to stay back while I carefully opened it outside. Inside was my grandmother's necklace, the one my ex had sold months ago. It was broken in half. I called Teresa again. She was getting used to my panicked calls by now. This is good, she said, which confused me until she explained. He's violating the restraining order. We have him on camera delivering the package. This is exactly what we need. The police were less enthusiastic when they came to take the report. We'll look into it, one officer said, but I could tell from his tone that it wasn't a priority. They took the broken necklace as evidence and left. That night, I had my worst panic attack yet. I couldn't breathe, couldn't stop shaking. My grandmother called Dr. Patel, who talked to me over the phone until I calmed down. She suggested I start keeping a journal, not just to document the harassment, but to process my feelings about it. So I did. I wrote everything down, every scary moment, every flashback to my marriage, every emotion I felt. It was painful, but somehow freeing. I started bringing my journal to therapy sessions, using it as a starting point for our conversations. 3 weeks after the necklace incident, I got a call from Teresa. We've got him, she said. The police had finally reviewed the security footage and identified my ex dropping off the package. They issued a warrant for his arrest for violating the restraining order, but when they went to arrest him, he wasn't at his parents' house. He wasn't at his job. He seemed to have disappeared. Part of me was relieved, but mostly I was terrified. If I couldn't see him, I couldn't know what he was planning. Then my grandmother's neighbor Carl stopped by. He was this retired guy who spent most of his time gardening and watching the neighborhood. There's been a guy sleeping in his car down the block, he told us. Been there 3 nights now. Thought you should know. My grandmother called the police immediately. They found my ex in the car with binoculars, a camera with a telephoto lens, and printouts of my daily schedule. They arrested him on the spot for violating the restraining order. I thought that would be the end of it. He'd go to jail for a few months, and I'd have time to rebuild my life without looking over my shoulder. But 2 days later, he was out on bail. His parents had paid it, of course. The conditions of his release included an ankle monitor and strict orders to stay away from me and my family. That's when I decided I needed to take more drastic action. I couldn't live like this anymore, jumping at shadows, afraid to go outside, constantly looking for threats. I talked to my grandmother about moving away, maybe to another state where he couldn't find me. She surprised me by agreeing immediately. I've been thinking the same thing, she said. I have a sister in Colorado who's been asking me to move move closer for years. We could both go. The idea of starting fresh somewhere new was both terrifying and exciting. I'd have to leave my job, my friends, everything familiar, but I'd also be leaving the fear behind. We decided to keep our plans completely secret, telling only Teresa and Dr. Patel. Over the next month, we quietly prepared. My grandmother put her house on the market but told everyone it was because she was downsizing. I gave notice at my job, claiming I needed time to focus on my mental health. We sold or donated most of our belongings and packed only what we absolutely needed. The night before our planned departure, I couldn't sleep again. I kept thinking I heard noises outside. Around 2 a.m., I got up to check the security cameras on my phone. What I saw made my blood freeze. My ex was at the gate of the community, arguing with the security guard. The ankle monitor was nowhere to be seen. I woke my grandmother and called the police. They arrived within minutes, but my ex was already gone. The security guard said he'd left when he couldn't get in, heading east on foot. The police searched the area but found nothing. We decided to leave immediately instead of waiting for morning. We threw our remaining bags in my grandmother's car and took off at 3:30 a.m., driving west instead of east to throw off anyone who might be watching. I kept checking the rearview mirror, expecting to see headlights following us, but the road behind us stayed dark. We drove straight through, stopping only for gas and bathroom breaks. My grandmother was a machine, refusing to stop for the night despite my concerns about her driving so long. "I'll sleep when we're safe," she kept saying. 20 hours later, we pulled into her sister Aunt Donna's driveway in a small town outside Denver. The mountains rose in the distance, beautiful and imposing. Aunt Donna was waiting for us, concern etched on her face. She hugged us both tightly and ushered us inside without asking questions. I slept for nearly 15 hours straight, the exhaustion of the drive and months of fear finally catching up with me. When I woke up, I felt disoriented but strangely peaceful. The air was different here, cleaner, crisper. The sounds outside the window were unfamiliar but not threatening. Over the next few weeks, we settled into a routine. My grandmother and Aunt Donna reconnected like no time had passed, staying up late talking and looking through old photo albums. I found a job at a local bookstore, nothing fancy, but it paid the bills and surrounded me with books, which had always been my comfort. I also found a new therapist, a woman named Lane who specialized in trauma recovery. She helped me understand that what I was experiencing was PTSD, and that my reactions, the hypervigilance, the panic attacks, the nightmares, were normal responses to abnormal situations. Recovery isn't about forgetting what happened, she told me. It's about learning to carry it differently. I started making small steps forward. I joined a hiking group that met on Saturdays. I took a pottery class at the community center. I made a friend named Jessie who worked at the coffee shop next to the bookstore. Normal things that felt extraordinary after years of isolation. 3 months after our move, I got an email from Teresa. My ex had been arrested again, this time for removing his ankle monitor and crossing state lines. They'd caught him in Nebraska, apparently heading west, toward Colorado, toward me. The panic I felt was immediate and overwhelming. He'd found us somehow. He was coming for me. I called Teresa in tears, barely able to form words. "Listen to me," she said firmly. "He didn't know where you were. He was guessing, and now he's in federal custody for violating the terms of his release. He's looking at serious time." I wanted to believe her, but the fear had already taken hold. I spent the next week barely leaving the house, checking locks repeatedly, jumping at every sound. Lane suggested I try something called EMDR therapy, a specific technique for processing traumatic memories. I was skeptical, but desperate. To my surprise, it helped. After several sessions, I could think about my ex without immediately spiraling into panic. I could acknowledge the danger he posed without letting it control my every thought. It wasn't a miracle cure, but it was progress. 6 months after our move, I received another email from Teresa. My ex had been sentenced to 3 years in prison for multiple violations: the restraining order, removing the ankle monitor, crossing state lines. 3 years. I read the email 5 times, letting the information sink in. 3 years of safety, 3 years to heal, to build a life, to become strong. I printed the email and taped it to my bathroom mirror as a reminder. Every morning when I brushed my teeth, I saw it. 3 years. That night, I slept without checking the locks. The next day, I went hiking alone for the first time since moving. The trail was moderate, winding through pine forest with occasional views of the mountains. About halfway up, I found a small clearing with a fallen log. I sat down, catching my breath, and realized I wasn't looking over my shoulder anymore. I took out my journal. I still kept one, though the entries were less about fear now and more about growth. I wrote about the feeling of the sun on my face, the sound of birds I couldn't name, the way the air tasted different at this altitude. Then I wrote something I hadn't been able to write before. I am not afraid today. It wasn't always true. There were still bad days, nightmares that left me gasping for air, moments of panic in crowded places, times when a man who looked vaguely like my ex would send me spiraling. But there were also good days, and they were starting to outnumber the bad ones. A year after our move, my grandmother and I bought a small house together. It had a garden for her and a reading nook for me, with windows that looked out on the mountains. We installed a security system. Old habits die hard, but we didn't check it obsessively anymore. I started dating again, cautiously. I met a guy named Frank at the bookstore where I worked. He was patient when I flinched at sudden movements, understanding when I needed to take things slowly. I didn't tell him everything right away, but when I finally did, he didn't run. He listened, really listened, and then he said, "Thank you for trusting me with your story." 2 years after our move, I got another email from Teresa. My ex was up for parole. My stomach dropped, but I didn't panic. I called her immediately to discuss options. "He's unlikely to get it," she assured me. "His behavior in prison has been problematic, but even if he does, the restraining order is still in effect, and now there's an interstate component. If he comes anywhere near you, he goes right back to prison." I thanked her and hung up. Then I went for a hike, the same trail where I'd had my moment of peace a year earlier. When I reached the clearing, I sat on the same fallen log and took out my journal. I wrote about my fears, acknowledged them, but I also wrote about my strength, how far I'd come, how much I'd survived. 3 weeks later, Teresa called with the news: parole denied. My ex would serve his full sentence. I felt a wave of relief so powerful it nearly knocked me over. That night, my grandmother, Aunt Donna, Frank, and I had dinner together to celebrate. We didn't talk about my ex or the parole hearing. Instead, we talked about Aunt Donna's garden, my grandmother's new painting hobby, Frank's promotion at work, my plans to apply to graduate school for literature. Normal things, beautiful, ordinary things. As I looked around the table at these people who loved me, who had stood by me through the darkest times, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: hope. Not just for a life free from fear, but for a life full of joy, connection, and possibility. I know my ex will be released eventually. I know the fear might never completely go away, but I also know I'm not the same person he terrorized. I'm stronger now, wiser, surrounded by people who see me clearly and love me anyway. I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm living, and that's the best revenge of all.